TLDR Learning presents the complete set of major and micro episodes for the month of November, brought together in their full long-form versions. It took weeks of research, writing, and editing to craft these stories, but we're proud to share them with you in this cinematic learning format. Through history, science, and motivation, our goal remains the same: to help you learn deeply, think critically, and evolve with every watch. Like, comment, subscribe, and share with the people you care about. Don't forget to leave these videos playing in the background. More information about how to use our videos are in the description. Enjoy. Majors Episodes 1 to 8. Compilation. The Great Minds and Machines That Shaped History. From Alexander's ambition to the trenches of World War I, this cinematic journey weaves together every major episode, exploring how power, psychology, and innovation, ancient and modern, has reshaped our human story. Watch how empires rose, plans unraveled, and ideas outlived their creators in the relentless pursuit of greatness and survival. TLDR Learning presents the timetable that broke the world. What single clause turned a brilliant timetable into a strategic trap? The answer begins in neutral Belgium and ends on the banks of the Marne. When the summer of 1914 opened, Europe stood on a knife edge. Treaties bound empires like invisible chains. Industries hummed with pride and menace. Germany, confident in its discipline and mathematics, believed it could master the coming storm through geometry and precision. It carried within its archives a plan so detailed that it resembled clockwork more than strategy, the Schlieffen Plan. Its promise was seductive: a short, decisive war. 6 weeks to crush France before Russia's armies could gather. Strike fast in the west, then pivot east while the world still reeled. Victory by schedule, peace by arithmetic. But hidden inside that confidence was a sentence written 75 years earlier. The Treaty of London, 1839. It guaranteed Belgium's neutrality. To Berlin's generals, it was an inconvenience. To Britain, it was an oath. And in that conflict of interpretation lay the trap. Across Europe, the fuse hissed. An archduke's assassination became a telegram exchange. A telegram became mobilization. Mobilization became destiny. By the final days of July, diplomacy had collapsed under the weight of timetables. Railway clocks, not cabinets, ruled the hour. At Berlin's great stations, crowds cheered the departing trains, showering soldiers with flowers and songs of Christmas victory. The air smelled of coal smoke and prophecy. In the quiet offices of the General Staff, pencils moved across maps. Every corps had its line of march, every wagon its minute. It was beautiful in its cruelty, a plan designed by engineers and believed in by a nation that trusted order more than chance. The right wing, immense and rigid, would sweep through Belgium and northern France, curling past Paris to close like a scythe. The left would hold, the right would decide. Timing was everything. Friction was forgotten. At dawn on the 4th of August 1914, German troops crossed the frontier. Mist clung to the Meuse River. Cavalry patrols rode ahead, sabers gleaming like polished promises. Behind them rumbled artillery so vast that villages trembled as it passed. Belgium answered with refusal. King Albert declared, "Belgium is a nation, not a corridor." His words carried more weight than all of Schlieffen's calculations. The fortress ring of Liège blocked the route to France. 12 strongholds of concrete and iron guarded the valley. The timetable allowed 48 hours to silence them. It took 11 days. Shells pounded the hills until the air itself screamed, yet the defenders endured. Each day lost rippled outward through the schedule like cracks in glass. Trains backed up, supply lines tangled, and men marched on roads that no longer matched the plan. For every hour spent at Liège, 1,000 elsewhere were undone. Meanwhile, in London, ministers argued through the night. Britain had guaranteed Belgium's neutrality. To break that word would unravel a century of policy. When Berlin ignored the ultimatum, Britain declared war. In that moment, the conflict that was meant to be local became global. A clause meant to prevent invasion had summoned the world. The Royal Navy closed the North Sea. Across the Channel sailed the British Expeditionary Force, small, professional, and precise. They landed in France just as German columns expected to be approaching Paris. The timetable was bleeding days. Still, the soldiers marched, believing speed could repair destiny. At Mons, British rifle fire tore through advancing German lines. The rate of fire was so fierce that survivors swore they faced machine guns. But it was discipline, not machinery, that shattered them. Men trained to fire 15 rounds a minute with calm precision. For the first time, the machine of war met human mastery and faltered. In Berlin, reports grew uneven. Victories on paper dissolved into mud and exhaustion. Helmuth von Moltke the Younger, inheritor of the plan, began to panic. He diverted divisions east to face Russia, weakening the right wing that Schlieffen had sworn must stay strong. "Keep the right strong," were the old man's final words. Now the right began to buckle under its own hunger. By early September, the German armies had marched 400 miles. They were starving, blistered, and half asleep. Horses collapsed in their traces, boots fell apart. Between the First and Second Armies opened a dangerous gap, invisible to headquarters but clear to the French. General Joffre saw it, and he struck. From within Paris, General Gallieni mobilized every taxi in the city to rush men to the front. It was a gesture more symbolic than strategic, yet symbols matter when nations tremble. On the 6th of September, French and British forces counterattacked along the Marne. The rivers ran with confusion and courage. German lines bent, then broke. Within days, the great advance turned into retreat. The Schlieffen Plan, designed for motion, had met the immovable truth of fatigue and resistance. What was meant to be a 6-week campaign became the birth of trench warfare. By the end of the month, both sides dug in along the Aisne River. Trenches, at first shallow ditches for cover, deepened into scars that would divide a continent. The race to outflank one another, the so-called race to the sea, ended when the line reached the Channel. There were no flanks left, only mud, wire, and waiting. The age of movement had ended. The age of endurance had begun. The dream of precision had collapsed under friction. A single treaty clause, once dismissed as a diplomatic formality, had turned the perfect timetable into a perfect trap. By violating Belgium, Germany had invited Britain. By inviting Britain, it had summoned the world. The shortcut became the snare. In the quiet that followed the first winter, soldiers looked out across no man's land and saw what mathematics could not predict: fatigue, fear, and an enemy who was equally lost in time. The Schlieffen Plan was over, but its shadow would stretch across 4 years and 10 million graves. Germany's timetable had broken the world, and from its shattered hours would rise the century we still inhabit. Thank you for watching TLDR Learning. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, and sharing with your friends. There is real research and a team of people working together to bring you these videos. We hope you enjoy them as much as we did making them. Check our channel for more content like this. See you in the next one. TLDR Learning presents The City That Refused to Die, Leningrad. When the German army reached the outskirts of Leningrad in September 1941, the city stood as both symbol and prize. It was the cradle of the Russian Revolution, the heart of Soviet industry, and the second largest city in the empire. To capture it would be to break the spirit of an entire people. Hitler believed that if Leningrad fell, Moscow would follow, but the city did not fall. It endured one of the longest and most terrible sieges in human history. 872 days of hunger, cold, and death. More than 1 million civilians would perish, yet the Red Banner never came down. The story of Leningrad is not only about war, it is about the strange arithmetic of endurance, how a city calculated hope against starvation and found a way to keep breathing when the world around it froze. When the invasion began, the German plan was swift annihilation. Army Group North surged through the Baltic states, capturing one fortress after another. By early September, they reached the suburbs of Leningrad. To the south, the Finns advanced from Karelia, closing the trap. The city was surrounded, 3 million souls inside a shrinking circle. In Berlin, Hitler issued his order: no surrender, no acceptance of refugees, no mercy. He did not want to occupy Leningrad. He wanted it erased. Artillery batteries were told to fire until nothing moved. Luftwaffe squadrons turned neighborhoods to ash. Yet beneath the smoke, the city refused to die. Factories that once built tractors now forged weapons. Women, teenagers, and pensioners labored in workshops without heat, feeding machines with the last coal and the last of their strength. The city orchestra continued to play. Newspapers printed on scraps of wallpaper. Librarians guarded volumes as if they were sacred relics. Leningrad fought not just with rifles but with rhythm, the rhythm of existence. Food vanished first. The daily bread ration dropped to 200 grams, then 125, a slice thinner than paper. People boiled leather belts, chewed wallpaper paste, and scraped the glue from furniture. Still, they went to work, because the city's survival depended on factories that could not stop. Winter arrived early. The temperature plunged below -30 degrees. Pipes burst, furnaces died, and the Neva River froze solid. But the frozen river became salvation, the road of life. Trucks crept across the ice at night, headlights covered, carrying flour, fuel, and sometimes children to safety. Every journey risked bombardment and cracking ice, yet they drove, guided by moonlight and faith. In the hospitals, doctors operated without anesthetic. In apartments, families burned furniture for warmth. Bodies lay in the snow because there was no strength left to bury them. Yet in the middle of this silence of hunger came a sound that defied reason: music. In August 1942, the composer Dmitri Shostakovich completed his 7th symphony. He wrote it for the city that could still hear, even through starvation. On 9th August, the score was performed inside besieged Leningrad by musicians so weak they had to be helped onto the stage. The conductor, Karl Eliasberg, raised his baton, and through loudspeakers the music was carried across the front lines. German soldiers listening from their trenches heard not surrender, but defiance. an entire city declaring that it still existed. By then, the siege had lasted nearly a year. German divisions tried again and again to crush the city, but the Soviet lines held. Supplies trickled in over the road of life and later through an air corridor. Every loaf of bread, every shell was a victory. The civilians kept diaries, quiet records of fading days. One child wrote, "I have buried all my family. There is nothing left but my city." Such lines outlived the writers. They remind us that history is measured not only by battles won, but by hearts that continued beating when they should have stopped. In January 1943, the siege ring cracked. Soviet forces opened a narrow land corridor along the southern shore of Lake Ladoga. Trains rolled again. Food and medicine poured in. It would take another year for the Germans to be driven completely away, but the worst was over. When the blockade finally ended in January 1944, Leningrad was a ghost of stone and memory. 1 million of its people were gone. Yet the factories restarted. The trams returned. The symphony was played once more, not as lament, but as triumph. The siege became legend, a testament to what endurance can mean when logic says there is none left. It proved that will can outlast hunger, that a city's identity can become its strongest weapon. The streets still bear the scars, but also the pride. Citizens, during shelling this side of the street is more dangerous. Those words remain painted on the walls, a warning turned into a memorial. Leningrad did not survive because it was prepared. It survived because it refused to accept the alternative. And that refusal, more than any bullet or tank, became its victory. Thank you for watching TLDR Learning. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, and sharing with your friends. There is real research and a team of people working together to bring you these videos. We hope you enjoy them as much as we did making them. Check our channel for more content like this. See you in the next one. TLDR Learning presents Alexander the Great, the boy who conquered time, the birth of a paradox. Time rarely pauses for mortals, yet for one boy born from Macedon's dust, it seemed to hesitate and take notice. In 356 BC, thunder rolled above Pella, while far to the west, the temple of Artemis in Ephesus burned. Seers muttered that the world had traded a goddess's favor for a conqueror's breath. In the royal house, 2 fires shaped the child's fate. Olympias, fierce and devout, swore Alexander carried Zeus's spark. Philip II, iron-willed and wolf-eyed, hammered the fractious Balkans into a lattice of alliances and spears. Between prophecy and policy, the boy learned to balance dreams with discipline. His first tutors fed him Homer before he could seat a saddle. When Aristotle arrived from Stagira, lullabies gave way to logic. Under an olive tree, the philosopher drew clean circles in the sand and said, "Time is the measure of change." The boy watched a hawk wheel above the hills and answered without speaking. If time measured change, then he would change the world so profoundly that time itself would have to keep up. He copied out speeches of Achilles, then trained his body to obey his mind like a drawn bow. Hours of riding, spearwork, and the stubborn quiet of study. At 16, he put down a rebellion. At 18, he commanded the companion cavalry at Cheronea, where Philip broke the sacred band, and Greece knelt in shock. At 20, he inherited the throne and the thicket of enemies that came with it. Sullen city-states to the south, hungry tribes to the north, and, across the Aegean, the long shadow of Persia. When Thebes revolted, he answered with speed that felt almost unnatural. In 3 days, he cracked its walls, stilled its proud voice, and sent a message through Hellas. Resistance now had an expiration date, and Alexander would set it. He walked the shattered streets at dawn, not gloating, but judging the arithmetic of empire. Mercy buys time, terror buys silence. The army gathered as the first light rinsed the stones, armor turning pink, then gold. He spoke without strain, each syllable measured like a pledge signed in iron. "We march not for power," he said, "but for immortality." Veterans who had seen 3 kings felt the hair rise on their arms. It wasn't bravado, it was direction. From that morning forward, calendars seemed to revolve around him. Ambassadors sent by frightened cities reported the same impression. The young king moved as if he had read tomorrow's page and was simply catching the rest of the world up to it. He sharpened the machine his father built. Phalangites with pikes like a field of winter reeds. Hypaspis that flowed like water where the line bent. Companion cavalry drilled until a wheeled turn felt like breath itself. Logistics wagons lengthened, siege trains multiplied, and scouts ranged out like fingertips of a single searching mind. He didn't merely inherit an army, he tuned it until it hummed. And when spring came, he pointed that instrument toward the sea, toward the old wound between Greece and Asia, and dared the horizon to meet him halfway, crossing the threshold. It was in spring 334 BC. The Hellespont flashed like a drawn blade. 40,000 men stood at its edge as gulls skimmed the chop and oars creaked like old hinges. Alexander took a spear, whispered to Zeus, and hurled it into Asian sand from the prow. "Taken," he said, not as theft, but as promise. Symbol first, blood later. He sacrificed at Troy, ran his hand along the stones, said to have witnessed Achilles, and fastened the old stories to his new campaign, as if myth were a banner, and he its rightful bearer. At the river Granicus, Persian cavalry poured down steep banks into glittering water. Commanders counseled caution. He answered with current and speed. Spur on Bucephalus, crest burning in the low sun, he drove first across the slick stones. Arrows stitched spray around him. A blade glanced his helmet. A second kissed his cheek and drew a bright thread of blood that ran toward his jaw. He did not slow. The companions smashed the crossing behind him, and the phalanx, those patient walls of pike, sealed the banks. It was over before fear could learn everyone's name. Western Asia reeled. Sardis opened its gates. Miletus fell. Halicarnassus raged and then went quiet. His march was a metronome. Supplies, siege, sortie, surrender. Each city another click on a clock measuring the empire's remaining certainty. On the Anatolian plateau, he paused before a dusty wagon and a knot of yoke bark hardened by centuries. The Gordian knot. Priests recited the prophecy. He who loosed it would rule Asia. Alexander turned it in his hands, finding no seam, no path through the knot's stubborn heart. He smiled the way a soldier smiles at a problem that yields only to will, drew his sword, and cut. The cord sprang and fell like defeated snakes. Gasps fluttered under the temple roof. He hadn't solved time, the story went. He had cut through it. Messengers rode ahead of his army now, not with orders, but with legend. A year later, the plain of Issus narrowed between mountain and sea, trapping Persian numbers where they could not breathe. Darius III arrayed an army that seemed to pour to the horizon. Archers like a storm, cavalry in tidal ranks, banners like forest canopies. Alexander made his own army small on purpose, a wedge sharpened to a point. Trumpets screamed. Dust rose and turned the afternoon copper. The Macedonian right surged, pivoted, and drove like a nail straight toward the royal chariot. For one long instant, Darius and Alexander saw each other across the ruin, the past's empire and the future's will. And then the King of Kings broke. He fled. The signal ran through the Persian host faster than any order. Half an empire dissolved before nightfall. After the victory, Alexander walked the field quietly. He paused where the wounded shifted and called for water. He lifted a fallen enemy's head so a soldier could pour it past cracked lips. Mercy and calculation were not enemies in him. They were twin reins. Around the campfires that night, the veterans spoke in low voices. Their young king was not simply conquering land. He was chasing something measured not in miles, but in hours, trying to outrun the decay that swallows every story, forcing history to keep his pace. When doubt crawled near and sleep seemed kinder than marching, he would say only, "Forward," and the tents came down, and the road unrolled as if the world too obeyed. Empire of light and ash. Egypt opened like a door no one had locked. In Memphis, he was crowned pharaoh, not as a foreign occupier, but as a restorer sent by distant gods. At the delta's western lip, he sketched a new city with his staff in the sand. Harbors splayed like fingers, streets crossed by sea wind, a lighthouse he could already see, though no stone yet stood. Alexandria, a harbor for grain and thought, for languages stitched together, for ships to carry ideas as easily as wheat. The priests at Siwa named him Son of Ammon. The desert accepted the verdict with indifferent stars. For a moment, perhaps, the boy from Macedon believed divinity was not a title, but a direction. East again. The heart of Persia still beat in the north. On the wide plain of Gaugamela, Darius assembled everything a dying empire could remember. Elephants armored like hills, chariots with scythed axles, cavalry in ranks that imitated oceans, and an open field large enough to hold their confidence. Alexander studied it as if it were geometry scrawled across earth. At dawn, he advanced not straight but obliquely, drawing the Persian left into meaningless space, then turned with precision and punched the seam no one else could see. The Macedonian center flexed. The companions burst through. Once more, Darius's courage failed before the shock of decision. The Achaemenid line folded back upon itself like cloth set on fire. He rode into Babylon as a liberator beneath garlands, into Susa as a collector of kingship's tools, and finally through the gates of Persepolis between guardian bulls carved from stone. The palace glittered with ancient gold, walls pressed with images of tributary nations bringing the world in bowls and baskets. That night, flames walked the beams. Some said it was drunken revenge for Xerxes' sack of Athens. Others swore it was ritual, an empire's funeral pyre. Alexander watched the roofs fall and listened to pillars crack in the heat. To stand still is to decay, he murmured to no one. To move is to live twice. The words were not bravado but a diagnosis. He could feel the pause after conquest like a sickness. The only cure he trusted was motion. Beyond Susa, the world grew thinner. Bactria's winds sand-blasted the skin. Passes pinched the sky, until only a ribbon of blue remained, and rivers turned to glass at the edges where boots broke them open. He hunted Bessus, Darius's betrayer, across distances that turned pride into endurance. He married Roxana to fuse steel with silk, policy with desire, east with west. He adopted Persian dress at court and asked Greeks to endure the sight. Some grumbled. They had not marched to become Persians. Alexander heard and pressed harder, convinced that empire required mixture, that a king of the world must look like more than one place. The march did not slow, it changed texture. Victories now were less about banners taken and more about lines redrawn inside men's minds. By the time they reached the Hindu Kush, even veterans counted by scars rather than months. Some mornings the camp stank of distance and frost. Other mornings it smelled of cardamom and the sweet smoke of new gods. The army had become a moving city with an alphabet of faces. In its center, a single will beat time like a drum, the edge of forever. In 326 BC, monsoon season along the Hydaspes. Clouds stacked like mountains and burst upon the plain. King Porus waited with war elephants armored in bronze, tall as moving towers, their eyes lined with coal and anger. The river ran high and treacherous. Alexander staged feints for days, training Persian eyes to watch the wrong bank. Then, in a rain-sheathed night, he ferried men through a maze of islands and landed where no one sensible would. Dawn found the Macedonians already forming ranks in mud that tried to eat their sandals. The battle sounded like weather. Trumpets and thunder layered until meaning blurred. Elephants charged, the ground shook, the phalanx braced into a living forest and bled in sheets. Cavalry tried to slide around the giants and instead found themselves swatted aside by tusks and panic. Alexander adjusted on the fly, harassing flanks, isolating beasts one by one, turning chaos into angles. By dusk, Porus stood wounded but upright, so tall in the saddle he seemed carved from the same storm he had just survived. Alexander approached, soaked, exhausted, eyes bright with respect. How would he be treated? Like a king, Porus said. And so he was. A rival made a friend. A province made an ally. Conquest, properly managed, is a multiplication rather than a subtraction. Yet the victory cost something that could not be carried on wagons. The men had seen the end of maps and felt the edge of the world under their palms. They refused to go farther east. Veterans who had marched from the Hellespont to India stared at the rain and wept without shame. Alexander raged, pleaded, offered fortune and new skies. The army stood like a wall no ram could move. He listened to the silence after his last argument and heard, maybe for the first time, the limit to will. He turned the column west. The ocean answered with a long breath, part relief, part accusation. Babylon welcomed him with gardens that seemed to hang from the air and courtyards that pooled the evening like copper. He planned new expeditions, Arabia, perhaps beyond, routes webbing out from his mind faster than scribes could ink them. Then came the fever. 32. Strong enough to break empires, not strong enough to shrug off a microscopic judge. He drifted between command and dream, issuing orders that aides scribbled with trembling hands. The generals leaned close. Who inherits your empire? He exhaled through heat and distance. To the strongest. Some heard a dare. Others heard a law of motion. The simple truth that momentum chooses its own masters. Within days, the heartbeat that had paced continents went quiet, but the echo carried for centuries. 20+ cities bore his name or his shadow. Trade routes shifted to the logic he had stamped into geography. Languages braided where his army had camped. Philosophers argued whether he had stitched the world together or torn it open in a way that allowed new growth. The body was mortal. The trajectory was not. Alexander did not merely conquer land. He conquered duration, compressing what most lives never approach into a single, sustained present tense. Even now, Every strategist who measures the earth by daring rather than distance walks in the wake of his drum. And if time is the measure of change, then the measure of Alexander is the way calendars everywhere still refuse to forget the path his boots burned into them. Thank you for watching TLDR Learning. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, and sharing with your friends. There is real research and a team of people working together to bring you these videos. We hope you enjoy them as much as we did making them. Check our channel for more content like this. See you in the next one. TLDR Learning presents The Schlieffen Trap, When Strategy Outsmarts Itself, the Blueprint of Doom. In 1905, a single gas lamp trembles above a desk in Berlin. Count Alfred von Schlieffen leans over a continent pinned to wood, the whole of Europe flattened beneath his hands. France flares crimson on the western edge. Russia stretches pale and cold to the east, and between them Germany lies like a heart clamped in iron. He adjusts his spectacles, studies the rivers and rail lines, and feels the pulse of danger throb beneath the paper. The smell of tobacco and ink thickens the air. His pencil moves with the precision of surgery, slow, inevitable, without hesitation. He draws an immense curve sweeping through Belgium, curling behind Paris and slashing south toward the Loire. The line looks elegant, almost kind. It is neither. Every stroke is a law. March here, turn there, crush swiftly. He writes the timings in the margin. Railway schedules, bridge crossings, minutes shaved from miles. War to him is not courage, but geometry. If Russia needs 6 weeks to wake its armies, Germany must destroy France in 4. The plan is mathematics wearing a uniform. There is no room for mercy. There is barely room for weather, only velocity. He pauses, listening to the clock. Each tick is a heartbeat, each tock a warning. Keep the right wing strong, he murmurs, sealing the doctrine in 7 quiet words. The officers around him nod. They see perfection, not prophecy. Outside, the city glows faintly in snowlight, unaware that a century has just been drawn in graphite. Schlieffen steps back, exhales, and knows he has turned time itself into an ally, or believes he has. Years pass. The lamp goes out. In 1913, he dies whispering that same sentence. Then, a summer later, an archduke falls in Sarajevo, and the continent erupts along the fault lines he once traced with steady fingers. Helmuth von Moltke the Younger, his cautious successor, unrolls the map and feels the ghost of his predecessor at his shoulder. He follows the curve with his eyes until it reaches the channel and back again. There are no notes about civilians, no spaces for doubt. The plan is pure logic, dangerous precisely because it is flawless. July 1914. Rail yards thunder with life. 11,000 trains wait under plumes of smoke, their engines panting like beasts about to run. 2 million men stand ready, uniforms crisp, songs rehearsed. Mothers wave flags, bands play. Coal dust drifts like dark confetti. Each engine is numbered, each minute spoken for. The first whistle sounds and the ground trembles as the cars begin to move westward. One by one they vanish into night. Steel following steel, prophecy becoming sound. In every carriage, soldiers believe the same comforting lie. That order can conquer chaos if the handwriting is neat enough. In his study, Moltke watches the smoke rise beyond the city, reflected in the window like black lightning. He does not celebrate. He understands that the plan is a wheel without a brake, and that once it begins to turn, it will not stop. until it grinds through every name written on it. Far away, Belgium sleeps beneath its neutral treaties, unaware that destiny has already redrawn its borders in pencil. The map Schlieffen left behind is about to be tested against blood, and paper, unlike men, never screams. The March Through Belgium. In August 1914. Morning unfolds across the Meuse like a pale flag, and the German army moves with the confidence of a clock beginning its day. Columns stretch from horizon to horizon, bayonets glinting, drums thudding in pulse with the railed timetables officers keep folded in their coats. Belgium's fields glitter with dew and disbelief. The soldiers march as if they are the visible gears of a machine whose mind resides somewhere far away in Berlin. Precision itself has become a doctrine. Hesitation, the only heresy. At Liège, the machine meets stone. Belgian forts, low and square against the river fog, spit flame through steel teeth. The air fills with the smell of concrete and blood. German infantry, trained for movement, collide with immovable walls and learn that numbers do not bleed for you. The forts hold for days that the timetable had not budgeted. Trains stall, bridges burn, horses collapse under the weight of perfect plans. Every hour lost is an invisible enemy. Inside his field car, Moltke feels his inheritance become a burden and repeats Schlieffen's dying words like penance. Keep the right wing strong. To keep it strong, he weakens everything else. Reinforcements peel from the center to feed the flank that must never fail. Messages shuttle back and forth, their certainty thinning like smoke. When Liège finally falls, its ruins glow orange against the evening, and the German army resumes its march, slower now, haunted by the realization that the world is not a diagram. Belgium is a country again, not a corridor, and it is angry. Britain joins the war on a scrap of paper signed in 1839. The news travels across the channel on radio waves and salt wind, then into Moltke's tent like an unwanted ghost. The empire that commanded the seas has chosen to defend a postage stamp of land. He does the math and knows what it means. Every road west now leads toward an island's wrath. Yet the machine cannot pause. Each mile consumed demands another. Orders echo like drums in an empty hall. Forward, always forward. Villages vanish under artillery. Orchards catch fire and burn like lanterns for the dead. Civilians run along the roads carrying whatever proof of life they can hold. A pot, a child, a clock still ticking. A sergeant writes in his journal that the sun looks like a shell burst stuck in the sky. The machine marches through ruins of its own making and calls it progress. By the first week of September, the spine of the army has grown thin. Boots rot, horses die where they stand, and the right wing, the wing that must stay strong, is so stretched it can feel the weight of its own ghost. The Marne lies ahead, shining like a mirror that will show the truth no one asked to see. In Paris, the church bells sound not for faith, but for movement. Taxi drivers abandon their fares, load soldiers into back seats, and race toward the front under headlights that slice fog into narrow futures. History will call it the miracle of the Marne, but miracles are just timing without permission. When the counterattack arrives, it feels less like a battle than a change in weather. The German advance slows, hesitates, then flows back east. Moltke sits in his tent listening to reports that crumble as they are read. He has followed the plan to the letter and discovered the letter was a trap. He writes a single sentence to his Kaiser. The plan has failed. Outside, rain begins to fall. The first soft thing in a war built from steel. The trap closes. in September 1914. The Marne flows slow and brown through a valley of exhausted men. The German army, stretched thin as parchment, edges backward across fields once promised to history. What began as a sprint has become an argument with mud. Trenches appear overnight, carved by hands too numb to count. They are shallow at first, shelters against bullets, then deeper, homes against time. Within weeks, they become the shape of the war itself. Narrow, unmovable, endless. Moltke rides the line and says little. His eyes flicker across faces that once sang of victory. He knows the war they trained for is gone, replaced by one that feeds on patience. The Schlieffen Plan had been built for precision. This new war runs on corrosion. Telegraph wires droop with rain. Orders arrive days late or not at all. Somewhere between Paris and the Rhine, the great idea of motion dies. At headquarters, the maps begin to stiffen. Arrows that once curved in grand sweeps now lie flat, hemmed by trenches that refuse to yield. The dream of a quick war, of calculation made flesh, has turned to arithmetic of loss. Ammunition by the crate, men by the thousand, inches by the month. The world tilts from speed to stagnation, from thunder to rot. Germany will never be the same. Neither will anyone else. Autumn brings a strange quiet. Soldiers write letters they cannot send, poems on scrap paper, jokes carved into the wood of rifles. Mud swallows everything: boots, memory, ambition. A corporal notes in his diary, "We fight the clock now." It wins every day above the lines. Crows circle where cavalry once rode. Even they seem to have learned the schedule. In Berlin, Moltke faces the Kaiser for the last time. "Your Majesty," he whispers, "we have lost the war." The words sound absurd. It is only September. But he is not speaking of nations. He means the war of precision, the one that could be measured, timed, and mastered. The Schlieffen Plan is dead, and in its decay, a new kind of war is born. One that feeds on uncertainty, one that will swallow generations. By winter, the trenches stretch from the North Sea to Switzerland. Europe has divided itself with a ruler, and then fallen into the line it drew. The men no longer ask when they will go home. They ask whether home still exists. Behind them, the blueprint that promised control gathers dust in a Berlin cabinet, its paper yellowing like surrender. Time has reclaimed its throne. The machine built to outrun history has discovered the oldest truth in the world, that history cannot be outpaced, only endured. When the guns finally fall silent, the line on Schlieffen's map will still scar the earth, visible from the air like an unhealed wound. Every empire that follows will study that scar and believe they can do better. None of them will. Thank you for watching TLDR Learning. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, and sharing with your friends. There is real research and a team of people working together to bring you these videos. We hope you enjoy them as much as we did making them. Check our channel for more content like this. See you in the next one. TLDR Learning presents The Conqueror's Mind, Alexander and the Psychology of Empire, the Fire of Inheritance. In 336 BC, the palace at Pella smells of iron and cedar. A 20-year-old king stands in the hall where his father once plotted the conquest of Persia. Philip II lies dead by an assassin's blade, and the son faces a kingdom holding its breath. Greece, fractious and proud, watches to see whether the boy will fracture with it. Outside, rain slides down marble columns. Inside, Alexander stares at the throne as if daring it to reject him. His tutor Aristotle taught him that destiny favors the prepared mind, but even genius trembles at coronation. He inherits not peace but potential energy. The Macedonian army, drilled, brutal, loyal, looks to him for command, not philosophy. He speaks once, clear and cold. There shall be no rival to Macedonia. Then he acts with the speed of instinct. Rebellious Thebes is erased. A single city turned into a warning carved in smoke. The Greek states, stunned into unity, realize that the age of arguing is over. When he calls for war against Persia, they do not debate. They march. In the War Council, maps unfurl like invitations. The Aegean gleams under torchlight, and the elders murmur of odds, distance, supply. Alexander listens, eyes bright, mind already moving faster than the room. He sees not lines, but possibilities, the psychology of empire. Conquest, he believes, begins in imagination. If men can be convinced that their limits are illusions, they will fight as if immortal. He will make them believe. At dawn, he rides to the sea. The Hellespont is a sheet of hammered silver beneath a bruised sky. He throws a spear across the water, the same gesture his ancestor Achilles made to claim Troy, and the weapon lands in Asian sand. "Taken," he whispers. The army cheers, half believing they have witnessed a ritual, half sensing they have just crossed the border between history and myth. Behind them lies Europe, cautious and old. Ahead, a horizon that no mind has mapped. Each soldier carries a rumor of the divine, that their leader descends from Zeus, that his eyes hold twin fires, one mortal, one eternal. Alexander does not deny it. He understands the strategic value of awe. The myth builds morale faster than gold ever could. When doubt spreads, he rides through the ranks bareheaded so the men can see the scar on his cheek, proof that even gods bleed. He becomes the mirror in which they see their best selves armed. Night falls. The camp sleeps beneath foreign constellations. Alexander studies a scroll by firelight, tracing old Persian roots with a soldier's hand and a philosopher's hunger. He is thinking not only of battle, but of permanence, how to weld victory into meaning. To rule the world, he must first conquer perception. Empires rise from belief before they rise from stone, and belief is born in the mind's theatre. He closes the map, extinguishes the lamp, and smiles into the dark as if hearing the applause of centuries not yet born. The mirror of command. The dust of Asia clings to sandals and armor alike. Alexander's army, 40,000 strong, moves like a single thought across the Anatolian plain. At the Granicus River, Persian cavalry waits. Shimmering armor, banners of gold, the hum of confidence. His generals advise caution. He answers with movement. He spurs Bucephalus into the current, crest catching the low sun, and leads the charge himself. Arrows stitch the river. One cuts his helmet, another grazes his cheek. Blood trickles down to his jawline, proof that leadership bleeds forward. The companions crash behind him, the phalanx closes ranks, and the Persian front buckles. By dusk, the enemy breaks. It is his first great victory, and it feeds a new hunger, certainty. Alexander begins to test not just armies, but loyalty. He divides spoils with public generosity, then watches eyes for envy. He rewards risk, punishes hesitation, and speaks of destiny as if it were a debt his men owe him. The myth grows teeth. Yet in private, he writes to his mother that every triumph feels smaller than the dream behind it. He is learning that ambition has no natural ceiling, that it expands by the same rule as the empire, always outward. On the road to Gordium, he stops before an ancient wagon bound by a knot of bark so tight that legend called it unbreakable. He who loosens it priests whisper, will rule Asia. He studies the chords, then smiles and draws his sword. One stroke, the knot falls in pieces. Some gasp at sacrilege, others at genius. Alexander simply says, "It is undone." The story spreads faster than his army marches. To the superstitious, he is chosen. To the pragmatic, decisive. To both, inevitable. His army crosses mountain passes choked with mist. Supply trains lag. Roads vanish beneath rain. At every hardship, he rides at the front, visible, relentless. When a soldier faints from thirst, Alexander pours out his own ration of water onto the sand so all can see equality made literal. Discipline is not enforced. It is hypnotized. The men follow because his belief burns hotter than their doubt. In the evenings, he debates philosophers and engineers about fate, stars, and siege engines. They see a commander dreaming in blueprints and parables. He sees them as bricks for his invisible palace, a kingdom of the mind that will outlast flesh. When asked what drives him, he replies, "The edge of the world and the fear it might end before I reach it." At Issus, he meets Darius III face to face across a narrow plain framed by sea and mountain. The Persian army outnumbers his 2-1, but numbers are a comfort only to those who need reassurance. Alexander aims not at the army but the idea, the heart at its center. His wedge pierces straight toward the royal chariot. Darius flees. The myth devours another empire, the empire within. In 330 BC, Babylon burns behind him, and Alexander rides east into myth. The empire he now commands stretches from the Nile to the Hindu Kush, but he feels no closer to completion. Victory, once sweet, has become a language he speaks without translation. Cities fall too easily. Their surrender denies him struggle. He begins to seek not land but proof, evidence that his vision can outlast mortality. The further he rides, the more he becomes a question no one can answer. At Persepolis, the palace of the Achaemenids blazes like dawn. Drunken soldiers cheer as columns crack in the heat. Historians will argue whether he ordered the fire or merely failed to stop it. Alexander watches the flames climb higher and says, "We have given Asia its funeral." Yet when the embers die, his face hardens with regret. Destruction, he realizes, wins no loyalty. The next morning, he forbids looting and orders temples rebuilt. Empire to endure must seduce what it cannot subdue. He adopts Persian dress, learns their rituals, and commands his officers to bow in the Eastern style. Macedonians grumble, some refuse. "I am not a god," he tells them softly, "but I am becoming something they can follow." The words frighten even him. He begins to dream of uniting East and West, not by conquest, but by fusion. One civilization under thought, not blood. Philosophers would later call it syncretism. His soldiers call it madness. In India, the rains come heavy as guilt. The Hydaspes River swells dark and cold. Across it waits King Porus with war elephants armored in bronze. The battle that follows is thunder made flesh. Men vanish beneath hooves. The phalanx bends but does not break. Alexander rides through chaos, directing, adapting, commanding with the rhythm of instinct. When Porus is finally captured, Alexander asks how he should be treated. "Like a king," Porus replies. Alexander smiles, drenched and shaking. So be it. Yet victory has turned hollow. His men, weary and far from home, refuse to march farther east. They have seen the edge of the map and suspect it leads to nowhere. Alexander pleads, rages, bargains, but the silence of his army is absolute. He turns back toward Babylon, his heart beating to a tempo slower than destiny. Fever finds him there at 32. His generals lean close. To whom do you leave the empire? He exhales the words that will fracture the world. To the strongest. When the heartbeat that had paced continents stops, the echo travels farther than his armies ever did. Cities will bear his name, scholars his shadow, dreamers his infection. Alexander proved that conquest begins in the mind and ends there too. What he built was never geography but momentum, the belief that human will can bend the horizon. The map outlasted the man because the idea never died. Thank you for watching TLDR Learning. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, and sharing with your friends. There is real research and a team of people working together to bring you these videos. We hope you enjoy them as much as we did making them. Check our channel for more content like this. See you in the next one. TLDR Learning presents Alexander's World Map, the edge of the known world, the cartographer king. The desert wind hums through canvas as Alexander studies a map no longer large enough to hold his ambition. The inked edges of the known world curl inward like a secret refusing to be told. To his generals, the conquest of Persia is complete. To him, it is merely a beginning. Empire, he believes, is not measured in territory, but in comprehension. If the gods drew boundaries, then his duty is to redraw them. He points east toward the horizon where the parchment ends and says simply, "We continue." Babylon becomes his workshop, its gardens the lungs of empire. Astronomers trace stars to calculate roads. Philosophers measure shadows to guess at the planet's size. He orders cartographers to stitch conquered lands into one continuous vision. Every river, every mountain, every trade route becomes a vein in the anatomy of a new world. What he seeks is not just mastery of distance, but proof that the earth can be known. We will leave the world smaller than we found it, he tells his scholars, and they believe him. He rides north into the Zagros Mountains, where the air thins and the land breaks apart like memory. Villages greet him with offerings of bread and maps drawn on goatskin. Each scrap is absorbed into the growing mosaic of empire, carried by scribes who work faster than armies. The campaign becomes both conquest and collection, a moving laboratory of human knowledge. Even in victory, Alexander demands measurement. How far? How wide? How long? He has turned curiosity into a weapon as sharp as any spear. At Ecbatana, he meets engineers experimenting with scale. Miniature cities built from clay, showing how irrigation could turn deserts fertile. He sees in these models the architecture of eternity. One day, he muses, the map will not be a mirror, but a memory. His officers, accustomed to orders, cannot tell whether he speaks prophecy or madness. But in the candlelight of his tent, he begins sketching a new world. The world as it might be, unified by roads and reason rather than blood. As autumn cools the Persian plateau, scouts bring tales of lands beyond comprehension. Mountains that touch the moon, rivers too wide to see across, creatures that breathe smoke. Alexander listens as if each myth were a dare. The map, once a tool, has become a rival. He is chasing not geography, but divinity, the point where the mortal mind meets infinity. When night falls, he steps outside and stares at the stars. They look back like witnesses to an ambition that refuses to sleep. The edge of empire. The snow crowns the Hindu Kush, like ghosts of forgotten gods. The army moves through mountain passes so narrow that sunlight arrives as rumor. Men tie ropes to one another, so death will have to take them in groups. Avalanches erase trails within minutes. Yet at every peril, Alexander rides at the front, cloak torn by wind, eyes fixed on the horizon. He is chasing the edge of the map, the place where human certainty ends. Crossing the Oxus, he enters Bactria, a world of blue rivers and stubborn rebels. The campaign becomes a slow fever of pursuit and persuasion. Villages surrender, then rise again. He builds cities instead of graves, calling them by his own name, as if to map himself across eternity. To the locals, he is both liberator and storm. When asked why he does not rest, he replies, because the earth has not. In Sogdiana, he captures the impregnable rock of Ariamazes, scaling cliffs thought impossible. When his men ask how, he smiles, because we did not know we could not. The phrase spreads through the ranks like a prayer. He begins to use geography as language, mountains for ambition, rivers for endurance, deserts for faith. The farther he marches, the more the earth itself seems to yield to his narrative. But even legends meet resistance. Guerrilla warfare bleeds time, and Alexander learns the patience of erosion. He marries Roxana, a local princess, to bind conquest with kinship. The union stuns his generals. They see strategy, she sees sincerity. For the first time, empire feels less like ownership and more like translation. The map of Alexander's heart expands in ways Aristotle never diagrammed. As the army descends into the Indus Valley, rain falls like memory returning. The men, burned by years of victory, begin to whisper of home. They have marched from the Aegean to the Himalayas, through 40 dialects and countless graves. Alexander hears their silence as if it were thunder. Still, he cannot stop. To halt would be to accept the map's authority over his will. The world, he says, ends only for those who stop walking. At the edge of India, scouts report a sea beyond imagination. Alexander feels the pull of the horizon like gravity. He orders new maps drawn, old ones burned. He knows that to see the ocean is to see the mirror of the infinite, a reflection of himself stretching back through time. The rain thickens, the rivers swell, and the map bleeds ink. Somewhere beyond the monsoon, history waits with an open hand. Thank you for watching TLDR Learning. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, and sharing with your friends. There is real research and a team of people working together to bring you these videos. We hope you enjoy them as much as we did making them. Check our channel for more content like this. See you in the next one. TLDR Learning presents The War to End War, the psychological aftermath of World War I. The silence after the guns. November 11th, 1918. The 11th hour. The guns that had roared for 4 years fall silent, one battery at a time, until the Western Front sounds like nothing at all. Just wind over wire, boots sinking into mud too tired to swallow. Soldiers stare at the horizon as if waiting for an encore. Some cheer, some cry, some simply stand, their ears ringing with the echo of absence. It is the loudest silence in human history. The Great War has ended, but nothing feels over. Men climb from trenches that have become their geography, valleys of fear, prayer, and repetition. They have learned to sleep beside corpses, eat beside rats, and measure life in inches. The armistice stops the fighting, but not the momentum. The machinery of death has been wound too tightly to halt in a single morning. Even the air tastes metallic, as if time itself has been rusted. In Paris, bells ring as diplomats assemble to invent peace out of paperwork. Maps are spread like wounds on tables. Borders are drawn with trembling hands. Empires crumble under pens sharper than bayonets. The victors call it justice, but the lines they carve will bleed for a century. Germany signs humiliation disguised as treaty, and resentment begins to ferment quietly in the cellar of Europe. The world congratulates itself on survival without realizing it has only rearranged its ruin. In hospitals from London to Vienna, the real war continues. Men who never saw a shell explode wake screaming each night, victims of invisible wounds the doctors cannot name. The term shell shock enters the language, a diagnosis born from thunder. Some tremble endlessly, some forget language, others stare into nothing, as if the mind has fled and left the body behind as evidence. The world calls them broken. They are simply the first generation to learn what trauma means. Cities rebuild, but the rhythm of life returns out of tune. Women who filled the factories now face empty promises. Veterans beg in the streets wearing medals like mirrors of irony. Poets trade the glory of battle for its grotesque anatomy. The war to end war becomes a phrase too heavy for even politicians to lift. The collective mind of civilization has been rewired, not forward, but sideways. Humanity has seen what happens when reason industrializes death, and reason itself may never recover. At Verdun, at the Somme, at Passchendaele, poppies sprout in churned soil as if the earth itself remembers. Farmers plough up bones with each spring thaw. Memorials rise in marble and silence, their inscriptions shorter than the grief they contain. Every name carved into stone is also etched somewhere unseen, in a psyche trying to reconcile the modern with the monstrous. The guns have stopped, but their echo has moved inside the human mind, where it will go on firing for generations, minds in ruin. The war has moved indoors, into memory, into medicine, into dreams. Across Europe, asylum gates close behind men who once held rifles. They flinch at footsteps, mistake thunder for shellfire, whisper apologies to ghosts. Psychiatrists, armed with nothing but words, try to chart this new territory of suffering. Freud writes of repressed trauma, Jung of the collective shadow. Both sense that civilization itself has fractured. The human mind, they realize, has trenches of its own. In London, a young officer named Wilfred Owen is buried with his poems. His words travel further than his body ever could. My subject is war and the pity of war. Writers become cartographers of despair. Remarque, Hemingway, Sassoon, all translate madness into language. Each sentence a bridge between what happened and what can be remembered. They give voice to a generation that has seen machines outthink their makers. The literature of the 1920s is not art. It is therapy conducted in public. Back in Berlin, inflation eats the city alive. Paper money litters the streets. Children play with banknotes worth less than their laughter. Hunger breeds extremism. Veterans gather in beer halls to curse the invisible enemy called betrayal. They wear brown shirts instead of uniforms, but the posture is the same. A demagogue learns to speak their language of loss, turning memory into weapon. The Treaty of Versailles becomes the fuse for a second detonation. Meanwhile, science begins to catalogue the invisible. Neurologists record tremors, psychologists test reaction times, governments count the uncountable cost of broken minds. The word neurosis enters newspapers. Rehabilitation becomes policy. Yet none of it touches the root, the dissonance between modernity's promise and its performance. the machine that once represented progress now symbolizes oblivion. The age of enlightenment has given birth to electric chairs, tanks, and chemical clouds. The light itself feels poisoned. Ordinary life becomes performance. Jazz rises from the ashes, fast and defiant. Music that refuses reflection. Cities rebuild in steel and glass, pretending transparency equals healing. Men dance to forget. Women cut their hair. Poets praise speed, as if velocity could outpace grief. Underneath it all, the subconscious hums with unrest. The 1920s glitter like a party held on a fault line. By decade's end, the diagnosis is clear. The world suffers from what one French doctor calls la fatigue de vivre, the fatigue of living. The trenches have moved to the mind. Anxiety replaces patriotism. Doubt replaces prayer. Civilization has survived its suicide attempt, but only barely. In every modern city, beneath every jazz note and neon sign, lies the same refrain. Never again, the war within. By 1930, a generation has grown up beneath the echo of gunfire it never heard. The children of the Great War inherit its silence like a second language. They play in fields seeded with shrapnel, breathe air still heavy with memory. Europe's mind, though outwardly mended, remains haunted. It dreams of order and breeds obsession. Nationalism returns dressed as restoration. The world, desperate for meaning, turns again towards certainty, no matter the cost. Art begins to fracture. Painters smear logic across canvas. Composers abandon melody for dissonance. The age of reason gives birth to surrealism, dada, abstraction. Movements that confess the truth no politician will. That the old world is gone. Freud calls dreams the royal road to the unconscious. Artists turn them into highways. Where once the muse was beauty, now it is trauma. Creativity becomes the final battlefield, where sanity negotiates its surrender. In the ruins of Europe's spirit, the first clinics of modern psychology take shape. Analysts, veterans, and teachers form an alliance to study resilience, a word newly necessary. They discover that healing is not the absence of pain, but its integration. Memory must be given structure, or it will rot into myth. Nations, too, begin their therapy. Memorials, anniversaries, anthems sung softly enough to hide the guilt. The scars become identity, but the lesson is incomplete. The same science that mapped the human mind also refines the weapons that nearly destroyed it. Tanks become faster, bombs smarter, propaganda more intimate. Humanity learns to manipulate belief with the same precision it once reserved for ballistics. The battlefield moves from soil to soul. When the next war comes, and it will be fought first in imagination. For now, the world calls it peace. Streets fill with cinema. Radios hum with promises of progress. Yet every invention hums the same undertone: fragility. The veterans grow old, their nightmares thinning into stories told over beer. But the trauma remains in the collective bloodstream. Psychologists call it transference. Historians call it pattern. Both mean the same thing, that history, like trauma, repeats until understood. And so the century continues, wiser perhaps, but not cured. The trenches have become invisible, running through schools, offices, families. The mind has inherited the battlefield. The guns no longer fire, but their echoes still teach us how to listen. The war to end war never ended. It only changed its weapon. Now it fires through memory, through silence, through time itself, reminding every generation that peace is not the end of conflict, but the discipline of remembering what conflict costs. Thank you for watching TLDR Learning. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, and sharing with your friends. There is real research and a team of people working together to bring you these videos. We hope you enjoy them as much as we did making them. Check our channel for more content like this. See you in the next one. TLDR Learning presents Echoes of the Machine, the industrial mind of World War I, the birth of the Iron Age. In 1914, the century opens not with a sunrise, but a spark. Factories hum like hives, railways pulse with movement, and the cities of Europe glitter with electricity. The illusion of control. Industry, once a servant, now grows into a sovereign. When war comes, it arrives as a summons to machinery. Blacksmiths become engineers, horses give way to engines, and the old gods of courage and honor are replaced by chemistry, speed, and steel. The future has finally found a way to kill faster than imagination. On the Western Front, men enter trenches dug not by strategy, but by survival. Above them, the air belongs to artillery. Each shell is an equation, a calculus of distance, velocity, and despair. The machine gun, once a curiosity, becomes an author of extinction. Infantry charges vanish before they can become stories. The war ceases to move, it grinds. Industrial logic has turned courage into arithmetic. Bullets per minute, bodies per yard, victories per ton of coal burned. Factories far from battlefields become the true front lines. In Berlin, Manchester, and Paris, women feed furnaces and rivet blades, their hands shaping the century. The home front becomes the engine room of empire. Smoke replaces silence. Production replaces prayer. The factory whistle becomes the heartbeat of nations, calling citizens not to worship, but to labor. The modern world has discovered its religion, efficiency. In this new faith, sacrifice is anonymous. The dead are counted by the thousands, not by name. Engineers design shells with mathematical beauty, each curve an elegy to reason. The generals trust in output graphs more than intuition. War has become a collaboration between ambition and assembly line. Even poetry bends to machinery. The world's gone mad, writes one soldier, but the machines stay sane. For the first time, humanity envies its own inventions. By 1916, the Somme becomes the proving ground of progress. Tanks, those metal beasts born from sketches in secret workshops, crawl from the mud like nightmares made real. The soldiers stare as if witnessing evolution itself. Some cheer, some cross themselves, others simply run. The age of the machine has no language yet, only sound. Gears grinding, gas hissing, engines coughing the smoke of civilization. Every revolution creates its own mythology, and this one writes in shrapnel. At dusk, when the guns pause for breath, the battlefield hums with mechanical afterlife. Engines cooling, wires sizzling, metal settling back into silence. The men listen and realize what they have built. A world that no longer needs them to keep killing. The industrial mind, once a marvel, has begun to dream on its own, the mechanization of flesh. The longer the war drags on, the more human beings resemble their inventions. Soldiers wear masks that make them look like insects. Medics patch men together with bolts and plates. The vocabulary of life becomes mechanical. Rotation, pressure, gauge, repair. Gas drifts over no man's land like a sentient fog. The first weapon that kills by thinking in chemistry. The modern age, once obsessed with enlightenment, now worships precision at any cost. Factories turn blood into data. A general asks for casualty projections as if ordering parts. Workers at home read the same figures and call it news. Civilians become components, each heartbeat another tick on the great clock of national purpose. The war economy erases distance. The front line runs through every factory and kitchen. For the first time, humanity realizes that industrial progress and destruction share the same blueprints. In 1917, the first armored divisions roll through ruined villages. The ground shakes, not from faith or fear, but from horsepower. Men begin to measure power in mechanical units rather than divine ones. Even language shifts. Mobilization, assembly, mechanization. The century's vocabulary begins to align with its soul. A private writes home, "We are the spare parts of something too large to see." He is right. The medics call them the reconstructed. Soldiers return from hospitals with faces rebuilt from wax and metal. Limbs whir, eyes click. Prosthetics, once miracles of compassion, become symbols of the age. Humanity, for all its pain, refuses extinction. It rebuilds itself in steel. Yet every repaired soldier is also a prophecy that the boundary between man and machine is thinning. The industrial mind has learned to imitate the body, and the body has begun to envy its own endurance. At night, engineers test new engines that roar like trapped animals. Pilots sit in fragile biplanes, gazing down at the glowing grid of Europe. Cities pulsing like circuits. They are the first generation to see war from the view of a god or a machine. The air becomes both battlefield and metaphor. The modern mind, untethered from Earth, begins to see control as altitude. Below them, the trenches remain, patient and endless. The old virtues, honor, valor, sacrifice, survive only as slogans painted on machines. The new virtue is endurance, measured in production quotas and engine hours. When the guns stop, the machines will not sleep. They will evolve. Civilization has learned too much about itself to ever be innocent again. The future will not wear armor. It will be made of it. The machine that remembered. The war ends not in victory but exhaustion. The guns fall silent, yet the machines hum on. Engines idling, assembly lines still hot. Civilization looks around and realizes it has built something it cannot unbuild. The men who return from the front bring the rhythm of the machine with them. Wake, work, repeat. Industry has colonized the human nervous system. The century of automation has begun. The trenches are filled, but the factories remain. Companies that once made shells now make cars. Plants that forged guns now mold dreams of convenience. The same minds that calculated death now calculate comfort. The public calls it progress. The poets call it denial. The line between creation and destruction has blurred into efficiency. Humanity no longer asks whether something should be built, only whether it can. In the 1920s, the hum of peacetime becomes seductive. Radios whisper unity. Advertisements promise perfection through products. The war's technological trauma hides behind chrome and optimism. The assembly line becomes a metaphor for destiny. Each man a cog, each life a process. The dream of precision that once guided artillery now dictates architecture, education, even love. The machine has taught the human mind to think in straight lines. But buried beneath the surface, the ghosts of the old engines wait. Inventors who built the first tanks now design tractors. Pilots become pioneers of commercial flight. Progress marches, but its steps still sound like mobilization. When crisis comes again, it will not need to invent new tools, only new excuses. The blueprint of the modern world is already drawn in soot. Alexander conquered with spears. Schlieffen planned with clocks. the 20th century rules with circuits. The war to end war gave birth to a world that cannot stop producing even when peace arrives. Industry became instinct. The soldiers returned home but left their rhythm behind, trapped in the gears of history. The Great War was not the death of civilization. It was its rehearsal. And so, the machine remembers. Every hum of an engine, every flicker of a bulb, every ticking clock carries a faint echo of gunfire. Humanity has not escaped its creation. It has synchronized with it. In the dark reflection of factory glass, the modern world stares back, metal, restless, and alive. The war ended in 1918, but the machine never learned how. Thank you for watching TLDR Learning. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, and sharing with your friends. There is real research and a team of people working together to bring you these videos. We hope you enjoy them as much as we did making them. Check our channel for more content like this. See you in the next one.